My name is Alex. I'm 30 years old, and my own parents took me to court to steal my grandmother's inheritance. Before I tell you how a single, boring-looking document blew their case wide open and left them speechless in front of a judge, let me know where you're watching from in the comments below. It really helps to know I'm not shouting into the void here. It all went down on what was supposed to be the single happiest day of my life. My wedding. The air was thick with the scent of lilies and hope. The music from the string quartet was swelling. My incredible wife Sarah was across the room, her laugh like a bell, and I felt light. For the first time, after a lifetime of feeling like I was carrying a weight I couldn't name, I felt free. I was building a life on my own terms with the woman I loved. That feeling of pure, untethered joy lasted for about 3 hours. I should have seen the storm clouds gathering. The warning shot came a few weeks earlier. My mother, Helen, in a flurry of what she called helping, had descended upon our small apartment. She rearranged our cupboards, alphabetized my spice rack, and generally treated our home like a disorganized satellite office of her own. I was working 60-hour weeks trying to close a big project, so I just let her. One afternoon, I came home to find her at our small kitchen counter, sorting through a pile of my mail. "Just getting rid of the junk for you, honey," she'd said with a bright, false smile. But her eyes lingered on a particular envelope, the one from the county tax assessor. It was the property tax statement for one of the 3 small apartments my grandmother, Amelia, had left me. I saw her register the address, her mind working behind the placid facade. She asked a question that seemed innocent at the time. "Oh, is this an investment property? You're so smart with your money." I mumbled something non-committal and changed the subject. I didn't want to lie, but I didn't want to open that door. I filed the moment away under weird things Mom does and moved on. That was my critical error. Back at the wedding reception, my father, Robert, made his move. He came up behind me as I was talking to Sarah's uncle, clapping me on the shoulder with a force that was just a little too hard. "Son," he said. His voice a low rumble meant only for me. "Your mother and I need a word. The study. Now." His smile was a thin, stretched thing that didn't come anywhere near his eyes. I looked at Sarah, who shot me a confused, questioning glance. I tried to give her a reassuring nod, but I felt a cold dread seeping into my bones. I followed my parents down the hall and into the quiet, oak-paneled study the venue provided. The heavy door clicked shut, and the joyous sounds of my wedding faded into a muffled thrum. In that sudden silence, their faces changed. It was like watching actors take off their masks after a show. My father's folksy charm evaporated, replaced by a cold, hard authority. My mother dropped her proud mother of the groom act, her arms crossing over her chest, her expression hardening into one of grim determination. "We know, Alex," my father said, skipping any preamble. "We know about the apartments your grandmother left you." My mother chimed in, her voice sharp. 3 of them, to be precise. "We saw the tax bill. You've been hiding them from us for 2 years." The word hiding was laced with accusation. I felt a surge of defensive anger. I wasn't hiding them. It was a private inheritance. Grandma Amelia left them to me, and only me. "Don't be ridiculous," my father scoffed. "There is no private in a family. Not with assets of that value. Those are family resources, and you have a duty to share them." "A duty?" I asked, my voice rising despite myself. "I have a duty? Where was this duty when I was working 2 jobs to put myself through state college? Where was this duty when I was eating ramen noodles for dinner so I could save for a down payment on my own house? This was a gift from my grandmother to me." "You are being selfish and disrespectful," my mother said, her voice dripping with disappointment. "Your brother, Brian, is struggling to get on his feet. He needs help. It is only right and fair that you sign 2 of the apartments over to him. It's what a good brother, a good son would do." The sheer, unadulterated entitlement of it sucked the air from my lungs. They stood there on my wedding day, demanding I hand over the only significant gift I had ever received in my life, as if it were their right. "No," I said. My voice was quiet, but it was as solid as steel. "Absolutely not. This is between me and my grandmother's memory. You are not a part of it. I saw a flicker of something dangerous in my father's eyes. His face, already flushed with anger, darkened. You will not speak to your mother that way. Before I could process the change in his demeanor, his arm shot out. It wasn't a push. It was a full-blown, open-handed slap. The sound it made, a sharp, wet crack, seemed to silence everything, even the muffled music from outside. My head snapped to the side. A hot, stinging pain exploded on my cheek, but it was nothing compared to the fiery humiliation that scorched its way through my entire body. In the ringing silence that followed, the study door, which hadn't been fully latched, drifted slowly open. Standing there, framed in the doorway, were my best man, Chris, and two of Sarah's bridesmaids. Their faces were frozen in identical masks of festive joy that melted into confusion, and then into pure, unadulterated shock. The public exposure seemed to break the spell. My father snatched his hand back as if he'd been burned. My mother's face, for a split second, showed a flicker of horror at what he'd done, but it was instantly replaced by a hardened, defensive fury. This was my fault, not theirs. My father pointed a trembling finger at me, his voice low and shaking with rage. You have made a terrible mistake. My mother delivered the final blow, her voice a venomous whisper that cut deeper than the slap. You'll be hearing from our lawyer. They turned and stormed out of the room, pushing past my stunned friends without a word. I just stood there, my hand on my burning cheek, listening to the sounds of my own wedding. But it was all just noise now. The joy had been poisoned. In that moment I made a vow. They wanted a war? Fine. They were going to get one. To understand why a man would go to war with his own family over property, you have to understand that this was never about the apartments. It was about my soul. To get why I was willing to burn it all down rather than surrender, you need to see the landscape of my childhood. It wasn't a home. It was a small, privately run dictatorship with a two-person ruling council. My parents, Robert and Helen. Their entire philosophy of life and of parenting was built around a central institution they called the Family Fund. It sounds so wholesome, right? Like something from a Norman Rockwell painting. But it was a trap. It was the instrument of their total and complete control. The rules were simple. All income, all gifts, all windfalls, no matter how small, belonged to the fund. And the fund's board of directors, my parents, had sole discretion over all expenditures. It was communism, but with a CEO and a CFO who just happened to be your dad and mom. I have so many memories of this, a whole library of small humiliations. When I was 16, I spent a grueling summer detasseling corn. This brutal, back-breaking work under a hot sun. I made a little over $1,000. I had a dream. A used Stratocaster copy I'd seen at the local pawn shop. It was $200. I wanted to learn guitar more than anything. The hearing was held in the living room after dinner. I made my pitch. I showed them the flyer from the pawn shop. I explained how I would practice every day. My father, Robert, barely looked up from his crossword puzzle. A guitar is a distraction. Your grades in calculus could be better. My mother, Helen, had the ledger out on the dining room table. It was a thick, leather-bound book that felt like it weighed 100 pounds. She clicked her pen. $200 is a significant withdrawal, Alex. We have to think about the family's overall financial health. The car insurance is due next month. But it's my money, I argued, my voice cracking with teenage desperation. I was the one in the cornfields. My back still hurts. My father put his pen down with a sigh of immense weariness, as if I were the most trying burden a man could bear. There is no your money and our money in this house, Alex. We have been over this. It all goes into the pot for the good of the whole family. That is the final word. I never got the guitar. The $1,000 I earned was absorbed into the fund. 3 weeks later, my younger brother, Brian, decided he wanted to go to a week-long summer camp for video game design. The cost was $1,200. I remember sitting in the kitchen as my mother got off the phone with the camp director. "He's all signed up," she announced cheerfully. "Isn't that wonderful, Robert?" It will be so good for his creative development. There was no hearing, no ledger, no discussion of the family's financial health. I looked at my dad, my mouth open, ready to scream at the injustice of it all. Before I could say a word, he looked at me with cold eyes and said, "Don't even start. Your brother needs encouragement. You need discipline. You are not the same." That was the moment I understood. The family fund wasn't about fairness. It was a system designed to funnel resources from the responsible son to the golden child. I was the worker bee. Brian was the prince. I was expected to produce. He was expected to consume. From that day on, I became a financial ghost. I started a cash-only lawn mowing business. I squirreled away every dollar in a shoebox hidden in the back of my closet. That shoebox was my declaration of independence. It was my first taste of real freedom, and I guarded it ferociously. The only person in the world who saw through the facade was my maternal grandmother, Amelia. She was a firecracker, a woman who had started her own small business in the 1960s and had an unshakable belief in self-reliance. She saw the suffocating system my parents had created, and she despised it. When she came to visit, she'd pull me aside. While my mother was busy in the kitchen, Grandma Amelia would press a folded $50 bill into my palm. Her hands were wrinkled and papery, but her grip was strong. "This is for you, Alex," she'd whisper, her eyes sharp and intelligent. "Don't you dare let them put this in their ridiculous ledger. This is seed money. You plant it somewhere they can't find it and you watch it grow." She was the one who taught me about compound interest at her kitchen table, sketching out charts on a napkin while the scent of her apple pie filled the air. She opened my first brokerage account for me on my 18th birthday with a check for $200. "A man who cannot manage his own money will always be managed by someone else," she told me, a motto I took to heart. "Don't ever be managed, Alex. You were born to be a builder." Her death 2 years before my wedding was a gut punch. She was my anchor, my ally. A week after the funeral, her lawyer contacted me. He informed me that she had structured her will very specifically. Her house, her savings, they were split between my mother and my aunt. But her 3 small rental properties, the fruits of her own business acumen, were left to me and only me. Her letter, enclosed with the legal documents, made me weep. "For my builder," it read, "you have the spirit of a founder, Alex. The world will try to take that from you. Don't let it. Use this foundation to build a life so strong and so high that their small-mindedness can't touch you. All my love, Grandma Amelia." I knew with absolute certainty that if I revealed this inheritance, my parents would see it as the ultimate infusion into the family fund. They wouldn't see it as a gift to me, but as a long-overdue asset for them to control. So I honored my grandmother's wishes. I kept it quiet. I became a landlord, dealing with tenants and leaky faucets. I funneled all the rental income into a separate account, the Amelia Fund, and I didn't touch a dime of it. Meanwhile, I was living a double life. To the world, I was a struggling analyst. I drove a 10-year-old Honda. I lived in a cheap apartment with peeling paint. My diet was a sad rotation of pasta, canned soup, and coffee. I worked my 9-to-5 analyst job, and then I worked nights and weekends as a waiter at a steakhouse. I was a machine built to save money. My friends wanted to go on trips. I said I was broke. They wanted to go to bars. I said I had to work. They couldn't see the mountain I was climbing. Every extra shift, every skipped luxury, was another step towards my goal. A down payment on a house that was entirely my own. A place they had no claim to, no say in. After 3 years of that relentless, soul-crushing grind, I finally did it. I signed the papers on a small 2-bedroom starter home. The day I got the keys, I walked into the empty house, sat on the floor in the middle of the living room, and cried until I had nothing left. I had built it myself. I met Sarah while I was in the thick of this struggle. She was a waitress at the steakhouse, working her way through grad school. She was smart, funny, and she had a bullshit detector a mile wide. On one of our early dates over cheap pizza, the whole story of my family just came pouring out of me. The fund, the ledger, the guitar, my secret inheritance. I laid it all out, expecting her to see a mountain of baggage. Instead, she just listened. When I was done, she was quiet for a moment. Then she smiled. "So what you're saying is, you're a secret real estate mogul who's pretending to be a broke waiter?" she teased. And then she grew serious. "Alex, you're not damaged goods. You're a survivor. You should be incredibly proud of the man you've become, not in spite of your family, but because you refused to let them define you." In that moment, I fell completely in love with her. She didn't see weakness. She saw strength. Marrying her felt like the final, definitive act of self-determination. So, when my parents stood in that study on my wedding day, demanding I hand over my grandmother's legacy, it wasn't a request. It was an invasion. It was them, with a battering ram, trying to smash down the walls of the castle I had so painstakingly built for myself, brick by painful brick. They weren't just asking for apartments. They were trying to reclaim ownership of my life. A week later, the official summons arrived. It was delivered by a courier, a thick, intimidating envelope that felt like it was radiating malice. Sarah was with me when I opened it. Her hand rested on my back, a small, warm point of stability in a world that was tilting on its axis. I read the words, "Robert and Helen versus Alex. Breach of familial fiduciary duty. Misappropriation of family assets." They were demanding the transfer of 2 properties, plus punitive damages for my deceit and the emotional distress it had caused. The papers slipped from my grasp. This wasn't a family squabble anymore. This was war, and they had fired the first deafening shot. The first call I made was to David Chin. Sarah's uncle had described him as a shark who only eats other sharks. When we met him in his glass and steel office high above the city, I understood. He had a stillness about him, an unnerving calm that made you feel like he was seeing 10 moves ahead on a chessboard. He read the lawsuit my parents had filed, his face showing no emotion at all. After what felt like an hour, he took off his wire-rimmed glasses and set them down precisely on his desk. "Well," he said, his voice dry, "this is one of the most creative pieces of legal fiction I've ever read. Breach of familial fiduciary duty is not a cause of action that generally exists outside of formal trusts. This is a Hail Mary pass, legally speaking." A wave of relief washed over me. "So it's baseless? We'll win." David held up a hand. "Let me be very clear, Alex. Winning a legal argument and surviving a legal war are 2 different things. Their case is weak on legal merit, but that's not the point. This isn't a lawsuit. It's a weapon of emotional terrorism. They are going to use the process to try and break you. They will demand every piece of paper you've ever touched. They will try to paint you as a monster to anyone who will listen. They're not trying to win in court. They're trying to make you surrender before you ever get there." He leaned forward, his eyes locking onto mine. "So I have to ask you, are you ready for that? Are you ready for things to get much, much uglier?" I looked at Sarah. She nodded, her expression firm. I turned back to David. "We're ready," I said, my voice more solid than I felt. "Whatever it takes." "Good," David said, a flicker of a smile touching his lips. "Because I don't like bullies." He wasn't exaggerating about things getting ugly. The opening salvo came from my mother, and her target was Sarah. She called Sarah's cell phone a few days later, while I was at work. Sarah told me about it that evening, her voice tight with controlled fury. "She didn't yell," Sarah said, pacing our small living room. "It was worse. She was using that sweet, concerned voice. Sarah, dear, I'm so worried about you. Alex isn't who you think he is. He has this secret side. He's obsessed with money. It's not healthy. A marriage can't survive with secrets like this. I'm just telling you this because I care about you as a daughter." I felt my fists clench. "What did you say?" Sarah stopped pacing and looked at me, a fierce fire in her eyes. I let her finish. And then I said, "Helen, I want to be very clear. The only threat to my marriage right now is this vicious, greedy lawsuit you have filed. Alex is the most honest and hardworking man I have ever met. The only secrets he kept were to protect himself from you. You are not my mother, and you are not my friend. If you ever Call me again to try and turn me against my husband. I will consider it harassment." Then I hung up. I pulled her into a hug, burying my face in her hair. "Thank you," I whispered. "Don't thank me," she said into my shoulder. "This is my fight now, too." Meanwhile, a second front had opened up at work. My nemesis, there was a guy named Mark. He was the kind of corporate suck-up who laughed too loud at the boss's jokes and used words like synergy in every sentence. He saw my ambition as a direct threat to his own. The lawsuit was a godsend for him. He could see the strain on my face. He noticed the dark circles under my eyes. And he pounced. We were in a team meeting for a major project, presenting our findings to our division head, Mr. Thompson. I was explaining a complex data model I had built. Halfway through, Mark cut in. "If I can just jump in to add a little clarity here," he said smoothly, addressing Mr. Thompson. "What Alex is trying to say is that the projections are a bit optimistic. I've run some more conservative numbers that present a, perhaps, more realistic picture." He started handing out a printout that I had never seen before. It was a blatant move to undermine me, to make me look sloppy and reckless in front of our boss. My heart pounded. For a second, I felt the exhaustion from the lawsuit weighing me down, tempting me to just let it go. But then I saw the smug look on Mark's face, and Grandma Amelia's voice echoed in my head. "Don't ever be managed." I took a breath. "Thank you, Mark," I said calmly. "But my model already accounts for that volatility. If you'll look at Appendix C on page 42 of my report, you'll see the stress test simulations, which project a worst-case scenario that is actually 15% more severe than your conservative numbers. I prefer to base my strategy on comprehensive data, not on guesswork." Mr. Thompson looked from me to a flustered Mark, then flipped to the appendix in my report. He nodded slowly. "Good work, Alex. Continue." I had won the battle, but I knew Mark wouldn't give up. I was now fighting for my career and my inheritance at the same time. The pressure was suffocating. Then came the discovery process. My parents' lawyer, a pit bull named Davis, served us with a request for production that was 1,000 pages long. He wanted everything. Every bank statement, every pay stub, every credit card bill, every email I had ever sent that mentioned the word money or family. It was a classic shock and awe tactic, designed to bury us in paperwork and legal fees. I spent nights and weekends in our spare bedroom, surrounded by boxes of old documents, the smell of dust and decaying paper filling the air. Each bank statement was a journey into the past, a reminder of every sacrifice, every penny pinched. It was emotionally draining. It was during one of these late-night sessions that David Chun called me. "Alex, I have a question," he said, his voice all business. "I'm looking at their initial petition. They list the exact addresses of the apartments and a surprisingly accurate estimate of their market value. You said you only saw your mother looking at one tax statement. That statement wouldn't have all this information. Did you talk to anyone else about this? In detail?" My mind raced. I hadn't. I was so careful. I only ever talked about the specifics with. My blood turned to ice. "Oh God," I whispered. "No." "Who, Alex?" David pressed. "My best friend," I said, the words feeling like poison in my mouth. "Chris. He was my best man." "Call him," David said gently. "You need to know for sure." My hand was shaking as I dialed Chris's number. He picked up on the second ring, his voice cheerful and oblivious. "Alex, my man. What's up?" I couldn't bring myself to make small talk. "Chris, I need you to be honest with me. Did you talk to my parents about my inheritance?" The silence that followed was so complete, so heavy, it was like a physical presence. I could hear him breathing on the other end of the line. "Chris," I prompted, my voice cold. "Dude, look," he finally stammered, his voice taking on a whiny, defensive tone. "Your dad called me, okay?" He was freaking out. He said you'd gotten this inheritance and were acting weird, shutting them out. He said he was worried you were going to blow it all. He just wanted to know the details so they could, guide you. "Guide me?" I repeated, my voice dripping with disbelief. "Guide me? Or control me?" I don't know, man. I was just trying to help, he said, his voice rising. I told him what you told me about the apartments where they were. I thought if everyone had all the information out in the open, you guys could work it out like a normal family. Honestly, Alex, I always thought it was kind of messed up that you got everything and Brian got nothing. I was trying to help you find some fairness. The betrayal was absolute. It wasn't a slip of the tongue. He had consciously chosen to betray my confidence based on his own warped sense of fairness. The same twisted logic my parents used. He had handed them the loaded gun and the map to my front door. You're not my friend, Chris, I said, the words feeling hollow and dead. You're their accomplice. I hung up the phone before he could respond. I slid down the wall in my hallway and sat on the floor, my head in my hands. My parents, my brother, my best friend. The circle of betrayal was complete. I felt like I was drowning. Sarah found me there a few minutes later. She didn't say anything. She just sat down on the floor next to me, wrapped her arms around me, and let me fall apart. In that moment, she was the only thing in the world that felt real. The weeks before the court date were a special kind of hell. It wasn't the loud, explosive hell of arguments and accusations anymore. It was a quiet, grinding hell of anticipation. Every ring of the phone made my heart leap into my throat. Every official-looking envelope in the mail sent a jolt of anxiety through me. The world seemed to be holding its breath, and I felt like I was suffocating. Our life ground to a halt. We stopped seeing friends, because I couldn't bear the thought of their pity or their questions. Our weekends, once filled with hikes and movies, were now consumed by document review and strategy sessions with David. Our dining room table disappeared under stacks of binders, transforming into the command center for Alex versus the world. One night, buried in a box of old college memorabilia, I found a birthday card from Grandma Amelia. It was from my 21st birthday, the year I'd officially moved out and was living in a tiny, roach-infested apartment. Her handwriting was a strong, elegant script. It read, "Happy birthday, my dear Alex. Some people are born into castles. You are a man who is building his own. Never doubt the strength of your foundation, and never, ever apologize for the height of your walls. They are a testament to your strength." I read it out loud to Sarah, my voice thick with emotion. It felt like a dispatch from the past, a message of reinforcement from my only ally. She took the card from my hands, her own eyes glistening. "She knew," Sarah whispered. "She knew who you were all along." We taped the card to the wall above the mountain of legal documents, a small flag of defiance in the heart of our war room. The pressure was taking a physical toll. I was losing weight. I couldn't sleep more than a few hours at a time, and when I did, my dreams were filled with courtrooms and faceless judges. The stress began to bleed into the one place I thought was safe, my relationship with Sarah. We started having small, stupid arguments, bickering over whose turn it was to do the dishes or why the car was low on gas. It was the friction of two people stretched to their absolute limit. The breaking point came a week before the trial. A courier delivered a thick envelope from my parents' lawyer. It wasn't another demand for documents. It was a settlement offer. The terms were laid out in cold, legal language. I would sign over one of the 3 apartments, the smallest one, to Brian, free and clear. I would also deposit $50,000 into a trust fund for him, to be managed by my parents. In exchange, they would drop the lawsuit with prejudice. I read it 3 times. The offer was an insult. It was a concession born of their weakness, not a genuine attempt at peace. But as I stared at the words, a treacherous thought crept into my mind. It would all be over. No trial. No public humiliation. No more legal fees. No more sleepless nights. We could get our lives back. The cost was 1 apartment and $50,000. I did the math in my head. I could afford it. It felt like a ransom payment, but maybe freedom was worth the price. That night, I pushed the document across the table to Sarah. I couldn't meet her eyes. "Maybe we should think about it," I mumbled, my voice sounding weak even to my own ears. "It's a way out. I'm just so tired of fighting, Sarah. I don't know how much more I can take." She read the offer, her expression unreadable. When she looked up, Her face was a mixture of love and profound disappointment. "A way out?" she asked softly. "Or a gilded cage? Alex, look at this. They want you to give Brian an apartment, and they want to manage a trust fund for him. This isn't a retreat. This is them trying to win a different way. They are still trying to control the money. They are still trying to treat you like their personal bank." "I know, but—" She cut me off, her voice firm. "No, there are no buts. Listen to me. The man I fell in love with would never sign this. The man who worked 2 jobs and ate ramen noodles to buy his own house would never sign this. The man who stood up to his father after being humiliated at his own wedding would never sign this." She reached across the table and grabbed my hands. Her grip was tight, grounding. "This isn't about how tired you are. This is about who you want to be for the rest of your life. Do you want to be the man who paid his bullies to go away, knowing they'll just be back for more later? Or do you want to be the man who stood on his own 2 feet and fought for his grandmother's legacy, for his own honor?" Her words were like a bucket of ice water. She was holding up a mirror, and I didn't like the weak, defeated man I saw reflected in it. She was right. This was a test. Surrender wasn't an option. It was just a slower, more painful death. A fire I thought had been extinguished flared back to life in my chest. I looked at her, my incredible, strong wife, and felt a surge of shame and gratitude. "You're right," I said, my voice clear and strong again. "You're absolutely right." I picked up the settlement offer. I walked over to our kitchen shredder, a cheap model we'd bought for junk mail. I fed the thick legal document into it, and we both stood there and listened to the satisfying, high-pitched whine as it tore our surrender into 1,000 tiny, meaningless strips. The sound was a declaration of war. The final battle was coming. The courtroom felt small and suffocating, smelling faintly of stale coffee and desperation. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead, casting a sickly yellow pallor on everything. It wasn't the grand, dramatic chamber I'd seen on TV. It was a drab, functional room where lives were quietly dismantled every day. I sat beside David Chun, my hands clenched so tightly in my lap that my knuckles were white. Across the aisle, my parents sat with their lawyer. My father, Robert, was dressed in a suit that was slightly too tight, trying to project an aura of wounded dignity. My mother, Helen, was already dabbing a pristine tissue at the corner of her eye, a master of preemptive dramatics. Behind them, my brother Brian stared at his own shoes as if they held the secrets to the universe. Their lawyer, Davis, began. He was a performer. He spun a tale of a simple, loving family, bound together by the sacred, unwritten constitution of the family fund. He painted a picture of my parents as benevolent shepherds, guiding their flock, and me as the one lost sheep who had stumbled upon a treasure and now refused to share it with the herd. He called my father to the stand. Robert's voice was thick with manufactured emotion as he spoke of the promises and understandings we all had. "We never needed anything in writing," he said, looking earnestly at the judge. "We were a family. We trusted each other. We always taught the boys that what belongs to one belongs to all." He spoke of my success as if it were a community project that I had selfishly privatized. Then my mother took the stand. This was the main event. She wept. She spoke of sleepless nights, of a mother's broken heart. "We're not here for the money, Your Honor," she cried, her voice catching perfectly. "We're here because our family is broken. Alex, he was always so brilliant, so driven. We're so proud. But he's forgotten where he comes from. His brother, Brian, is a good boy, but he needs a little more help, a little more stability. Is it so wrong for us to want to ensure both our sons are safe and secure?" It was a symphony of manipulation, and I could see it was having an effect. The judge, a woman named Eisenhower with a reputation for being tough but fair, listened with a carefully neutral expression. Then it was our turn. David Chen's demeanor was the complete opposite of Davis's. He was calm, methodical, almost surgical. He didn't start with me. He started with the cracks in their story. His first witness was Mrs. Henderson, my grandmother's elderly next-door neighbor. She was a sweet, slightly flustered woman, but her memory was sharp. She spoke glowingly of my grandmother Amelia and of my relationship with her. Amelia always said Alex was an old soul, Mrs. Henderson said, smiling kindly at me. She said he had a builder's spirit. She was so proud that he wasn't waiting for a handout from anyone. David then asked a seemingly innocuous question. Mrs. Henderson, in the weeks after your friend Amelia passed, did you happen to have any interactions with her daughter, Helen? Mrs. Henderson fidgeted with her purse. Well, I don't like to carry tales, but one afternoon I was in my garden, which is right next to Helen's mother's garden. Helen was on her patio, talking on the phone to her sister, Carol. She was quite loud. She was upset about the will. I heard her say, "He got all 3 properties." And then I heard her sister's voice, quite clearly, say, "Well, you have a right to that, Helen. That's a family asset. If you fight for it, you'll win." I'm sure of it. A ripple of murmurs went through the few observers in the courtroom. My mother shot a venomous glare at Mrs. Henderson. David had just planted a crucial seed. This lawsuit wasn't born of principle. It was born of greed, watered by bad advice. But that was just the warm-up act. Your Honor, David said, turning to face Judge Eisenhower. The plaintiffs have presented a narrative, a story of a simple family, a verbal agreement, and a son who has betrayed that trust. It is a compelling story. Its only flaw is that it is a complete fiction. He walked back to our table and lifted a heavy, blue binder. It was at least 3 inches thick. He placed it on the edge of the witness stand, not with a dramatic flourish, but with the quiet thud of irrefutable fact. We would like to submit into Evidence Defense Exhibit A, he announced. This is a court-certified personal financial audit of my client, Alex, prepared by the forensic accounting firm of Sterling & Fitch. It documents, in excruciating detail, my client's complete financial life from the day he turned 18. Davis leaped to his feet. Objection. My client's personal finances are not on trial here. The issue is the family agreement. Your Honor, David countered smoothly. My client's finances are the only thing on trial here. The plaintiffs claim he was a financial partner in their family fund. This document will prove that to be impossible. Objection overruled, the judge said, her eyes fixed on the binder. I want to see this. Proceed, Mr. Chen. David opened the binder. He didn't need to call me. The numbers were my witness. If you would turn to page 5, Your Honor, David began, you will find a summary of my client's independently verified net worth, exclusive of any inheritance. As of the date this lawsuit was filed, that number stands at just over $1.2 million. I heard a sharp, strangled gasp from my mother. I chanced to look over at their table. My father's face had gone slack, his mouth slightly agape. They were staring at me as if they had never seen me before. David was relentless. If you'll now turn to page 12, you will see a detailed income history. The court will note that my client, as a senior analyst, has received performance-based bonuses for the last 3 years that, in each year, exceeded the total annual income of both plaintiffs combined. We have attached his W-2s and a notarized letter from his employer's HR department confirming his compensation. He let that sink in. The air in the room was growing thin. But the most crucial section, Your Honor, David said, his voice dropping slightly, begins on page 25. It is a complete, forensic cash flow analysis between my client and his parents. This analysis, certified by the auditors, confirms that since the day Alex turned 18, there has not been a single monetary transfer from his parents to him. Not a dime for tuition. Not a dollar for rent. Nothing. In fact, as the chart on page 27 shows, the flow of funds went exclusively in the opposite direction, from my client into his parents' family fund, until he graduated college and ceased the payments. He closed the binder. The soft click echoed in the silent room. The story the plaintiffs have told this court is that their son, a man of modest means, got a lucky break and now refuses to share. The reality, proven by this audit, is that their son is a self-made, highly successful man who built his own fortune through years of discipline and hard work. The inheritance from his grandmother wasn't a lottery ticket. It was a loving acknowledgement of the success he had already achieved on his own. Their claim that he misappropriated family resources is a fantasy. The truth, Your Honor, David said, turning to look directly at my stunned parents, is that my client was the family resource, and he has simply and rightly refused to be misappropriated any longer. David walked back to our table and sat down. The silence that followed was profound. It was the sound of a lie dying. A big, ugly, foundational lie that had propped up their world for decades. My parents were not looking at me. They were staring into the void, the smoldering wreckage of their own narrative. Judge Eisenhower looked down at the report in front of her. She slowly took off her glasses. Then she looked up, over the bench, and her gaze, cold and hard as a diamond, fell upon my parents. And I knew with absolute certainty that it was over. Judge Eisenhower placed her glasses very deliberately on the polished wood of the bench. She took a slow, deep breath, and the entire courtroom seemed to hold its breath with her. When she finally spoke, her voice was quiet, but it cut through the silence like a razor. I have been presiding over family court for 15 years, she said, her eyes locked on my parents. I have seen tragedy, I have seen complexity, and I have seen profound human failing. But rarely, she paused, letting the word land with devastating weight, have I seen such a transparent and shameless act of greed masquerading as parental concern. My mother, who had been a fountain of tears moments before, was now bone dry, her face a mask of shocked disbelief. My father seemed to be trying to shrink into his slightly too tight suit jacket. The plaintiffs have built their case on the foundation of a myth, the judge continued, her voice rising almost imperceptibly with each word. The myth of a family fund, a verbal agreement for which they have provided not one scintilla of evidence. What has been demonstrated here today, through incontrovertible documentation, is not a partnership but a pattern of control. A system designed to exploit the labor of one child for the benefit of the other. She leaned forward, her gaze withering. You did not come to this court seeking justice. You came here to litigate your disappointment. You came here to use the power of the state to enforce your own failed family dynamic. You have slandered your son's character, you have questioned his integrity, and you have wasted the precious and limited resources of this court with a lawsuit that is not just frivolous, but malicious. Every word was a nail being hammered into the coffin of their case. I felt Sarah's hand find mine under the table, her fingers lacing through mine. It was happening. The vindication I had barely allowed myself to dream of was unfolding right in front of me. Therefore, Judge Eisenhower declared, her voice ringing with finality, the court dismisses this case with prejudice. The plaintiffs are barred from ever bringing this or any related matter before this court again. She wasn't done. Furthermore, given the egregious nature of this filing, I am ordering the plaintiffs, Robert and Helen, to bear the full cost of the defendant's legal fees and all associated court costs. You will receive a bill from Mr. Chen. I advise you to pay it promptly. She picked up her gavel. This court is adjourned. The sharp crack of the wood echoed through the room. It was the sound of my freedom. Their lawyer, Davis, looked like he'd been electrocuted. He shoved his papers into his briefcase with frantic, jerky movements, muttered something to my stunned parents, and practically fled the courtroom as if it were on fire. David Chen, by contrast, simply leaned back in his chair, a small, satisfied smile on his face. He turned to me and gave a single, firm nod. Well done, Alex. We gathered our things and walked out into the long, sterile hallway. And there they were, my parents and Brian. They weren't moving. They were just standing there, a small, defeated cluster of people looking utterly lost. The arrogance was gone. The righteous indignation had vanished. All that was left was the raw, ugly truth. My mother was the first to move. She took a hesitant step toward me, her hands clasped in front of her. Alex, she began, her voice a reedy whisper. We had no idea. You never told us how well you were doing. We were just trying to look out for Brian. The excuse, the same tired refrain, was so pathetic, so hollow, that it didn't even make me angry anymore. It just made me sad. Look out for him? I asked, my voice even and devoid of the rage that had fueled me for months. No, you weren't looking out for him. You were looking for an easy solution. You wanted to take from me to give to him because it was easier than teaching him how to build something for himself. You used my sense of duty as a weapon against me for 30 years. Today, it stopped working. My father found his voice, a blustering, defensive tone. That's not true. We gave you everything. We loved you both the same. No, you didn't, I said, the truth feeling simple and clean. You loved the idea of us. You loved the roles you assigned us. I was the provider. He was the project. And today, the provider resigned. I looked at my brother. For the first time, he lifted his head and met my gaze. I saw no malice in his eyes, just a deep, swimming confusion, like a boy who had just woken up in a foreign country. He was a casualty in a war he never even knew was being fought. I turned back to my parents. I knew this was it, the final conversation, the closing of a door that had been left ajar for far too long. This is over now, I said. All of it. The lawsuit, the fund, the endless expectations, the guilt. I'm done. A real sob escaped my mother's lips. Alex, you can't mean that. We're your family. You're my parents. I corrected her gently. But family is supposed to be a safe harbor. You were the storm. A relationship has to be built on a foundation of respect. You tried to legally dispossess me. You lied about me under oath. You tried to poison my wife against me. The foundation is gone. There's nothing left to build on. I reached for Sarah's hand, and she stepped up beside me, a silent, unshakable pillar of support. I'm not going to say I'll never speak to you again, I said, because I wanted this to be my choice, not a vow made in anger. But I will say this. If a day ever comes when you can look me in the eye and apologize for what you did, not what you think I did, but what you did without excuses or justifications, then maybe we can have a conversation. But until then, I need to live my life with my real family. I squeezed Sarah's hand, a clear signal that my family was now standing right next to me. I held their gaze for a moment longer, then I turned. Sarah and I walked down the long hallway, our footsteps echoing in the quiet. I didn't look back. I could feel the weight of their stares on me, but for the first time in my life, it felt powerless. The invisible strings they had used to control me for 3 decades had been cut, not by a judge's gavel, but by the clean, sharp edge of the truth. We were walking away from the ruins and toward a life that was finally, completely our own. The 18 months following the trial were like the world slowly turning from black and white back into color. The first change was the silence. The constant, low-grade hum of anxiety that had been the background music of my life for as long as I could remember just faded away. No manipulative phone calls from my mother. No passive-aggressive emails from my father. No demands. No expectations. Just a vast, quiet peace. It was unnerving at first. I kept waiting for the other shoe to drop, but it never did. In that newfound quiet, our life began to flourish. At work, liberated from the stress of the lawsuit and the constant need to watch my back, I poured all my energy into my projects. Mr. Thompson, my boss, was a man of his word. He recognized my resilience and my dedication. A year after the trial, he called me into his office. Alex, he said, we're creating a new senior VP position to lead the emerging markets division. I want you to run it. I was stunned. The promotion was more than a title or a pay raise. It was a validation of my character, a reward for weathering the storm. Sarah and I sold my small starter house and bought a home in a leafy, quiet suburb an hour outside the city. It was a classic colonial with a big backyard and a massive old oak tree that was perfect for a swing. It was our castle, built on a foundation of mutual respect and partnership. We spent our weekends painting walls, planting a garden, and slowly, piece by piece, building a sanctuary. We filled it with laughter, with easy conversation, with the kind of uncomplicated happiness I had only ever read about in books. The most profound change, the one that truly healed the deepest wounds, arrived 9 months after the trial, on a rainy Tuesday in April. Our son, Arthur, was born. The moment I held him, This tiny, perfect human being. Something inside me shifted fundamentally. All the years of anger, all the resentment I had harbored towards my parents, it didn't vanish, but it lost its power. It became small and insignificant in the face of this enormous, all-consuming love. Looking at his tiny, trusting face, I made a silent promise. This little boy would never have to earn his parents' love. He would never be a provider or a project. He would be cherished for exactly who he was. Sarah and I opened a $529 college savings plan for him the week he was born. We called it the Arthur Fund. It was our way of rewriting history, of creating a family fund based on unconditional love and opportunity, not on control and obligation. Life settled into a beautiful rhythm. And then, one ordinary Tuesday afternoon, my phone rang. The number was unfamiliar. I almost let it go to voicemail, but some instinct made me answer. "Hello," I said. A hesitant voice on the other end said, "Alex?" Took me a moment to place it. It was thin, reedy, and stripped of its usual confident swagger. It was my brother, Brian. I walked out onto our back deck, watching Sarah push Arthur on the swing we'd hung from the old oak tree. "Brian," I said, my voice carefully neutral. "It's been a while. What's up?" "Yeah. I know," he stammered. "I'm sorry to just call like this, but I didn't know who else to talk to." He sounded awful. "What's wrong?" I asked. He took a shaky breath. "It's Mom and Dad. Things have been really bad since the trial. The legal fees, they were more than they could handle. They had to sell the house we grew up in." I felt a flicker of something, but it wasn't sadness or guilt. It was a detached sense of an inevitable outcome, like watching a faulty building finally collapse under its own weight. "They're living in a small 2-bedroom condo over by the airport now," he continued, "and they're just angry all the time, at the world, at each other, at me." "I'm sorry to hear that," I said, and it was true, but in a distant way. "That's not why I'm calling," he said quickly. "The thing is, I finally got a job, a real one. It's just an entry-level clerk position at an accounting firm, but it's a start. I got my first proper paycheck last Friday." "Hey, that's great, Brian. Congratulations," I said, genuinely happy for him. "Yeah, thanks." He paused, and I heard him swallow hard. "They wanted it." "Wanted what?" "My paycheck," he said, his voice cracking with a fresh sense of disbelief. "All of it." They sat me down at their new little dining table. They had the old ledger book out, the family fund ledger, and they told me that now that I was earning, it was my duty to turn over my entire salary to them, to help rebuild what was lost, to pay them back for the cost of raising me. I closed my eyes. Of course they did. They hadn't learned a thing. They had just lost one provider and were immediately trying to press the backup into service. "What did you do, Brian?" I asked quietly. There was a long silence on the other end of the line. I could hear his labored breathing. "I said no," he finally whispered. It was the two most powerful words he had probably ever spoken. "I told them it was my money, that I earned it, that I needed it for rent and food. Dad," he started yelling, "just like he used to yell at you." Mom started crying, saying I was selfish, that I was abandoning them just like you did. He took another shaky breath. I looked at them, sitting there with that stupid ledger, and for the first time, I saw them. I really saw what you saw all those years. It was never about family. It was just about control. So, I stood up, I packed a duffel bag with my stuff, and I walked out. "I'm staying on a friend's couch." He was quiet for a moment, and then the words I never, ever expected to hear came tumbling out. "Alex, I get it now. I am so sorry. I was a coward. I was their puppet. I stood by and let them treat you like that, and I was too stupid and too weak to see it. I'm sorry." The apology wasn't for me, not really. It was for him. It was the sound of his own chains breaking. The resentment I'd held against him for so long just dissolved. I thought about what Grandma Amelia would have done. Not lecture, not shame, build. "Thank you for telling me that, Brian," I said, my voice gentle. That took guts. I paused. Listen to me. I'm gonna text you a phone number. Her name is Susan, and she's a financial planner. She's tough, but she's brilliant. She'll help you build a budget, open a retirement account, figure out a plan. A plan for your life. Okay, he whispered. Start there, I said. Start by building your own foundation, brick by brick. That's what Grandma Amelia would have wanted for you. And when you feel like you're standing on something solid, something you built yourself, give me a call again. We'll get a cup of coffee. I hung up the phone and looked out at my wife and son, laughing under the big oak tree. The sun was setting, casting long shadows across the lawn. A chapter had ended, and a new one, full of possibility, had just begun. Later that night, long after Sarah and Arthur were asleep, I found myself in my home office. On the wall above my desk, I still have the birthday card from Grandma Amelia taped up. Never apologize for the height of your walls, she had written. For years, I thought that was a metaphor for being guarded, for being tough. But as I stood there in the quiet of my own peaceful home, I finally understood what she really meant. My walls weren't made of anger or resentment. My walls were my boundaries. They were my work ethic. They were my integrity. They were the loving, respectful partnership I had built with my wife. They were the promise I had made to my son. They were the healthy, self-sufficient life I had painstakingly constructed, a life where I was the architect, not a tenant beholden to the whims of a cruel landlord. For so long, I had been obsessed with the idea of inheritance. I thought it was the 3 apartments, the physical property, the number in a bank account. I thought the whole battle was about my parents trying to steal that from me. But standing there, I realized they never could have stolen the real inheritance, because they never even knew what it was. The apartments were just seed money, like the $20 bills she used to slip into my hand. The real inheritance from Grandma Amelia was the lesson she had taught me. The unshakable knowledge that true wealth isn't given or inherited. It's built. It's built through discipline, through sacrifice, through the courage to stand up for yourself, even when you're standing alone. My parents, in their blind, desperate greed, had inadvertently given me the final, priceless gift. They had created a crisis so profound that it forced me to build my walls higher and stronger than I ever thought possible. They had forced me to fight, and in fighting, I had discovered my own power. I had to lose the family I was born into to fully claim the family I had chosen. I looked around the room. The sturdy desk I had bought with my own salary. The family photos on the bookshelf. The faint sound of my son breathing peacefully through the baby monitor. This was my castle. This was my fortune. It was a wealth measured not in dollars, but in peace of mind. It was the freedom to live without fear, to love without condition, and to raise my son in a home where he would be taught to build his own strong walls, not out of fear, but out of self-respect. The greatest irony is that I did, in the end, share my inheritance. I shared it with my brother, Brian, when I gave him the advice and the tools to start building a life of his own. That was the only way it could ever be truly shared, by passing on the knowledge of how to build, not just by handing over the bricks. That's the real inheritance. It's not a thing you get. It's a thing you become. Thank you so much for listening to my story. I know it was long, but it feels good to finally get it all out. Sharing it makes the load feel a little lighter. I hope it resonated with you in some way. It's a lonely thing to feel like you have to fight against the very people who were supposed to protect you. Have you ever had to make a difficult choice between your family and your own well-being? I would be honored if you shared your experience in the comments below. Reading your stories, knowing I'm not alone, means the world. And if this story moved you, please consider hitting that like button and subscribing to the channel. It helps more than you know. Thank you.